Okay, great.
Good to go?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Dowry. I'm serving as receiver for the city of Chester. Joined here today by the Municipal Financial Recovery Advisory Committee. Today is Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. As we start, I'd like to welcome Mr. Andrew Sheaf on behalf of the Governor's Office and DCED, Ms. Kelly Diaz on behalf of Delaware County Council, Chief of Staff, Mr. Vijay Kapoor, and Executive Assistant from DCED, Mr. Cody Dill. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Having called this meeting to order, first item of business is public comment. Mr. Dill, would you like to speak to this item?
Sure, thank you. So since our last MFRAC meeting, we have again not received any additional public comments. So we would just like to continue to encourage the public to reach out to us. Public comments can be submitted to our email address at info@chesterreceivership.com. That's also found on our website at chesterreceivership.com as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dill. And I want to point out that we are joined here by Councilman Will Morgan on behalf of the city of Chester. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone.
All right, so our next agenda item is an update on the status of the receiver's recovery plan. Mr. Kapoor, would you like to make any comments at this point or save everything for the presentation?
I think it's probably best, Mr. Receiver, to save it for the presentation.
And as the next agenda item is a brief update from me. I too will, for the most part, defer to the presentation, but I wanted to encourage folks to continue to frequently visit the city's website, chestercity.com, to take a look at the vacancies and encourage one, if not all, to apply. The CFO, Director of Finance Recruiting, is moving forward. That posting, I think, did come down since our last meeting, but there are still several key positions that Chief Leitner and others in the city HR are spearheading and heavily recruiting for. So please visit the city's website to keep up on those vacancies and those opportunities, I should say. For today's meeting, I want to yield the balance of the time to Mr. Kapoor to present a recap and where are we going. Today, 2 days short of the 3-year anniversary of Governor Wolf declaring a fiscal emergency. We want to provide an update on where we are and where things are headed. Mr. Kapoor, are you ready to take it from here?
I am. Can you see the PowerPoint up?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vijay Kapoor. I serve as the Chief of Staff for the receiver for the city of Chester. As the receiver noted, we have a presentation today that's really 2 days short of the 3-year anniversary of Chester being declared to be in a fiscal emergency by then Governor Wolf. I will be very honest with the MFRAC committee and with the public. This is a sobering presentation from our end. We are going to be discussing some topics in this presentation that we hope do not come to pass. But as has been part of what we've been trying to do over the last almost 3 years, is provide the public with with transparency here as to Chester's condition, and as to the truth of the problems that is facing, and the need to act urgently to address those problems. Because in very simple terms, Chester is really running out of time. And we have had a lot of these MFRAC presentations. You've seen a lot of data. We're going to provide a little bit of more of that to you today. But we need to be clear that there needs to be a focus right now on solving the problems that Chester has. And that really needs to be the full focus of everybody here who is participating, who is watching, and who will be impacted by Chester's situation. So let me start here with this slide. Again, on Thursday, 2 days from today, will mark the 3-year anniversary of Governor Wolf declaring Chester to be in a fiscal emergency. We are running out of time, to be very clear. Chester has been under some type of state oversight for over 28 years. It does not have 28 more years. Our view, based on what we have been seeing here with Chester, based on our work here, is that time is running out, and that if we're not able to find some type of comprehensive solution by the end of the year, there may not be an alternative for Chester other than disincorporation. And we'll talk about what that means a little bit later. I want to be very clear that the receiver and all of us are working very hard to avoid it. It would be the absolute worst case scenario for everybody here involved: employees, retirees, residents, residents of the city of Chester, residents of Delaware County, residents of the region. We are working very hard to avoid that. But effectively, what disincorporation would mean would be the city of Chester would cease to exist as a city. It would not have any municipal elected officials, and instead it would be an unincorporated service district, which again is not something that any of us want to see. We also have to be very clear here from the receiver's end that the ongoing litigation that we are embroiled in with some of the city elected officials, both in terms of the bankruptcy and in terms of the plan modification in the Commonwealth Court, are preventing us from implementing the actions that we think are necessary in order to fix Chester's problems. As part of the presentation today, we will go over some of that litigation, where it stands, what are the next steps there. But in terms of the outline, I want to start with Chester's financial condition as it stands today, high-level analysis of that. Then I want to talk about the status of both the bankruptcy and the plan modification litigation. And then I want to talk about, again, what we hope to avoid, but we need to talk about, which is disincorporation. So let's start with the financial condition. Recently, within the past couple of weeks, the city released the 2019 audit. And what that audit showed was a general fund loss of approximately $6.8 million in 2019, with a cumulative general fund balance of negative $27.7 million. We'll talk more about those in a couple of slides. This is just a bit of an overview. We need to also let people know, and this is not something that I think a lot of folks do know, unless you've been following the bankruptcy very closely. But without an agreement that was brokered by the city's bankruptcy conflict council, the city would have likely run out of money this September. With this agreement that we'll talk about in a few minutes, the city's projected year-end general fund balance, although it is positive, it is still critically low. And we'll talk about what that means for the city financially in a few minutes. Now, one relative bright spot for those of you who are police retirees is that since receivership, we have seen an improvement in the funding in the police pension fund. When the receiver was appointed back in June of 2020, the pension fund had about $1.28 million for benefits in it. Based on where we are in March, we estimate it to have around $7.77 million. And so the number of months sort of left in for pension payments was improved from 3 back in July of 2020 to 16 in March of 2023. And we'll show you the data behind that. With respect to looking forward and the 5-year projections, PFM, the receiver's financial consultant, is in the process of updating the 5-year projections. They are not yet finalized. They're close to being finalized, but not yet. But even with those and with the preliminary numbers we're seeing there, the city is still on pace to face and what we're calling and is true is an insurmountable deficit in 2025, absent a real comprehensive solution. And the point of why we are even talking about disincorporation today, or even the concept of it, why we think it's even worth raising, because we know it's going to cause concern among people, is that in order for us to implement a comprehensive solution on the scale that we need in the city of Chester, that's going to take about a year to implement in order to get money into the pension funds, in order to get money into the city, in order to structure any type of comprehensive solution. Those things take a long time. And so if we work backwards from saying 2025, we really need, and we need a year in 2024 to implement, we really need to have a comprehensive real solution by the end of this year. And we realize that puts a timeline and a deadline on us, and it puts it on the other parties involved here. But again, we have to be transparent with these groups, with everybody out here about what Chester's financial condition is and what the future may bring. So let's start again with the audit. Again, recently released its 2019 audit. I will say that work is beginning on the 2020 audit. We're still in an early phase of that, unfortunately, even though it is April of 2023. But that showed a significant loss, $6.8 million loss in 2019. And that resulted in a year-end general fund balance of approximately negative $27.7 million. Now, those of you who have been following these MFRAC presentations, those of you who are in the police pension fund or in any of the pension funds know that there is a significant amount of money, almost $40 million, in missed annual pension payments and interest to those pension funds the city did not make. That negative $27.7 million that I'm talking about here does not include that approximately $40 million in missed MMO payments and interest that should be in the pension funds. The 2019 general fund loss was the 7th annual loss in 8 years. We'll see in a moment in a graph that only year that did not have a loss in 2017 came as a result of the city borrowing money. So effectively, it was as a result of borrowing money. It wasn't because the normal recurring revenues came in higher than the recurring expenses. And so, again, we'll show you in a moment, but this continued trend of really significant general fund losses, and I want to be clear, this is not something you normally see in a city. It just isn't. Not for this period of time, not for those significant losses. What it shows is, even with skipping the full pension payments to these funds, it shows the inability for the city to be able to balance its budget. Its recurring revenues cannot keep up with its recurring costs. And that is very clear. And although we don't yet have audits for 2020 through 2022, we also expect to see large general fund losses for those years as well. So let's look at the graphs here. This is the general fund results audited, by the way. This is audited from the city's auditor from 2012 to 2019. And again, you'll see in 2019 a loss of almost $6.8 million, starting with losses in 2012 of around $2 million and significantly increasing here. In 2017, we did see that positive result, but again, that came as a result of a borrowing. So it's really not a true or accurate depiction of the city's financial shape. And again, this does not include the almost $40 million in skipped payments, full payments to the pension funds. To put that $6.8 million into context, that's around almost 14% of general fund revenues in 2019. Now, that's a lot. That is a very significant amount. That is not a small amount that you can sort of manage around at the margins. That's big. And again, if we look at the cumulative amount, so this is adding year over year, the deficit's adding year over year over year, you'll see in 2019, we have a negative general fund balance of $27.7 million. And again, that does not include the approximately $40 million in the missed pension payments. So if you added that together, it's around $67.7 million, a huge amount. And again, not something those of us, even who work with cities in financial distress, see. This is it's very concerning. And again, it continues to show shows the trend. Now, if we move to 2023 and take a look at cash flow, obviously a city cannot operate without cash. You need cash to pay employees, you need cash to make pension payments, you need cash to pay vendors. So what we do is we create, and our financial folks create a report that's called the cash flow report. And that looks at the cash flow that we have data on up until as recently as we have it. And that projects out into the future what we expect the cash flow to be going forward. And obviously, you never want to be negative in a cash flow because that effectively means you shut down. You also want to be very concerned about having very little in your accounts, particularly because unexpected instances occur and you need to have enough money to make payroll and to continue with your operations. Earlier this year, the city was on track to run out of money in September due to, number one, the city's structural deficit, and number two, with a dispute with the city's bondholders over Covanta and Harrah's revenues. Now, thankfully, the city's bankruptcy conflict counsel, the firm of Hangley Aaronchick, was able to negotiate an agreement with the bondholders. We refer to this as the lockbox agreement because it has to do with money that goes into the city's lockbox accounts. So thankfully, as a result of that agreement, we do not project the city at this point to run out of money at the end of the year. That said, the end result that we'll see in a moment is still really concerning. It's still a very low amount. It's still very concerning to us. And it could change for the worse if the city's expenditures come in higher than expected, which is what has happened in the past. So slide 10 here, hopefully folks can see this. This is the 2023 cash flow projection without the lockbox agreement. This is where we were about a month ago. And what you'll see here is the city's cash flow, starting the year with around $2.6 million. But without the lockbox agreement that freed up money going into the lockbox to the city's general fund, the city would have run out of money here, basically sometime in September. We would have projected the city would have run out of money right around September. And of course, would continue to lose money and end the year with a negative $11.2 million balance, which again, we would not be able, this would not occur because the city would have had to have shut down by that point. With the lockbox agreement, we project that the city will end the year with about $3.4 million in its general fund. In a moment, I'm going to explain why not all that money is able to be spent. But this is an extremely low amount for a city like Chester. So on slide 12, if we look at with and without the lockbox agreement, the green bar is with the lockbox agreement. The red line, is without the lockbox agreement. You'll see the differences here, both with and without. So it was critical for us, and again, thankful to Hangley Aaronchick and the bondholders to be able to reach an agreement here. But effectively, that is really only going to help us this year. Next year, we're not going to be able to access some of those amounts that were freed up in the lockbox. A lot of those were escrow amounts that are not there anymore. And there's ongoing litigation there to resolve a dispute over whether or not some of those bonds are considered secured or unsecured. So to talk about the cash flow projection, again, we show the green line ending around $3.4 million. Although that's, again, better than being negative, the amount that the city actually will be able to spend is probably closer to around $2.4 million. And that comes as a result of outstanding checks to vendors that have not yet been cashed. So the city will go in early December or November, we'll send out checks to vendors. There's several $100,000 in checks each month that the city has written but have not yet been deposited. So we have to account for those. And there's also several $100,000 in earned income tax revenues, distressed pension earned income tax revenues that need to then be deposited into the pension funds. We can't use them for ongoing operations. So when you net those out, you get around $2.4 million. Now, $2.4 million is not a lot for the city of Chester. That is equivalent to around 16 days of operations. And based on the Government Finance Officers Association's best practices, we really should have a general fund balance of at least, at a minimum, $9.5 million. And you can see we're nowhere close to that. We're $7.1 million less than that. And again, that amount does not include, that $2.4 million does not include money for additional necessary services, such as animal control. And we know, because we've been hearing a lot from residents about the desire to implement those services, which we really currently do not have in the city of Chester. And it sort of goes without saying, but it is important because we can't forget about it. The city will still need that $5 million interest-free tax anticipation loan from DCED, from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, in order to make payroll in January of 2024. We will not be able to make payroll that year without that amount because we simply will not have enough cash in our accounts to do that. We need to wait for property taxes, earned income taxes, all of those amounts to come in for cash flow in order to make those payrolls, which is why, again, it is so critical that we have that $5 million interest-free loan from DCED. So let's talk a little bit about the pension fund, the police, and particularly the police pension fund, because I know that was one of the key concerns when we were coming into receivership. The receiver was appointed in June of 2020. And the two significant tasks that we had were, number one, making sure that the city didn't run out of money, but also number two, making sure the police pension plan didn't run out of money. And it was dangerously close to doing so. In July of 2020, the amount of money that the city's police pension fund had to pay benefits was around $1.28 million. Fast forward to where we are in March of 2023. We estimate the amount with the earned income tax coming in to be approximately $7.77 million in March of 2023. Now, again, this is much better than when we were in July of 2020, but the fund is still extremely severely underfunded and still needs to be addressed. But thankfully, we're not where we were in July of 2020. If we translated those amounts, those dollar amounts, into how many months of pension benefits you had left to pay out, back in July of 2020, it was around 3 months of pension payments left in the fund. Very little, very few. That's, again, I've never seen something like that in a fund here in Pennsylvania or anywhere where I've worked. Fast forward to where we are now in March, we see an amount of around 16 months. And part of the reasons you see these going down is we get distressed pension earned income tax funds put into the fund on a quarterly basis, and then pension payments are made on a monthly basis to retirees. So wouldn't surprise me if we saw 15 months in the next month, but again, 16 months is much better than where we were back in July of 2020. And then finally in this area, I want to talk about the 5-year projection, and hopefully we should have these numbers relatively soon. And when we do, we will obviously present them to the committee and we'll present them to the public. But we are still on pace. The city is still on pace to face, number one, an operating deficit in 2024, and really an insurmountable deficit in 2025, absent an implemented comprehensive solution. And you all may recall back in the September 13th MFRAC meeting of last year, we showed the city facing a $12.4 million budget deficit in 2025, due in large part, or in some part, I should say, to the ARPA funds going away and another federal grant the SAFER grant that is funding 8 firefighters expiring. So again, just to be absolutely clear with people about the city's financial condition and what this means and why we are working so hard to try and avoid, to try and reach a solution so that we avoid what we're going to have to talk about later, is that just the expiring ARPA funds alone are going to result in the layoffs of 12 people in the city, including 5 in the Public Works Department. Currently, that's how they're being funded directly through ARPA funds, which again will go away in 2025. The other concern we have with respect to the SAFER grant is the SAFER grant funds 8 firefighters whose jobs are also going to be at risk when that grant runs out. So again, we need to be able to find some type of comprehensive solution. And that is just with respect to the employees. There is still a deficit, a significant deficit over there of $12.4 million that we are going to have to try, that really, again, we've described here as being insurmountable. We have got to get a solution prior to that and implemented in 2024 so that we address the situation that 2025 brings. So I want to move now to the status of the bankruptcy and the plan modification litigation, because those are having a really a big impact on the receiver's team, on its attorneys, and on the attention that we are having to turn to and deal with, which is taking away from us on the need and the desire to focus on a comprehensive solution. Certain city elected officials have appealed both the bankruptcy opinion finding Chester eligible for Chapter 9 bankruptcy, as well as the Commonwealth Court order confirming the plan modification that included the suspension of administrative duties of elected officials to serve as day-to-day department heads. Because of that Commonwealth Court appeal, because the state Supreme Court has agreed to take that case, city council members are back as department heads while the Pennsylvania Supreme Court hears the case. Now, these appeals, they have and they will continue to delay the receiver's abilities to address the city's critical financial and operational problems. Despite the fact that we're 3 years into a fiscal emergency, I understand the elected officials have a right to appeal these decisions, but they have also not put forth any credible alternative plan to solve the city's problems. So let's talk about the bankruptcy matter. First, mediation began on January 13th of 2023. The city on behalf, or the receiver on behalf of the city, filed Chapter 9 bankruptcy back in November, started mediation on January 13th.
Mr. Kabor?
On,
Mr. Kabor?
yes.
I have to interrupt you when you said that the city has not put forth any credible plan. We've provided you and the receiver with 2 credible plans. So to say that and share that on this meeting is not true. Just put that out there.
Mayor Kirkland, are you referring to, when you say 2 credible plans, could you please elaborate? I'm not sure that we're on the same page.
Sure, we had a credible plan when we put out, and I shared with you concerning the water authority, Chester Water Authority, and the plan that we put forth, working with the water authority to stay in place and the finances that will be coming to the city. Also, the other credible plan was the possibility of the selling of the water authority. So we had 2 plans on the table. So for Mr. Kapoor to say that there was no plan by the city, that's not true.
Well, I would agree with Mr. Kapoor in that what was presented were 2 offers to monetize the system. That is not a comprehensive plan. And to that end, you've also mentioned placing those funds in a trust and that they will provide for generations to come for the city of Chester. We have yet to see the math on how that pencils out. So do you have that mapped out, and are you able to share that level of detail in the plan?
I shared that with you when you first arrived here, sir. And
no, you shared an offer for the system. One was the Corvius private-public partnership, and the other was an offer to through the RFP for Aqua or American Water to acquire the system.
I shared that with you when you first arrived, and I'll be more than glad to share it with the rest of the committee.
Again, those are just offers for the system. That is not a comprehensive plan to avoid bankruptcy and to address all of the concerns that are in the city for the city of Chester's finances. Again, we need, by my calculations, we need more than just monetization to happen. Before the end of the year, we need negotiations with labor unions. We need to settle with retirees. We need to finalize 2 monetization deals, as the Delcora assets are also in question. We need to improve operations, and we need to get a plan approved by the federal judge. Just an offer on the system alone is not addressing all of the points of a financial plan.
Well, we did have in place, when we were working with our police and firefighters, we were working with them on our comprehensive plan and dealing with their pensions and their contributions, but we were excluded from that process by you and your team.
Again, well, unfortunately, the level, the severity that we're dealing with here, adjustments to the active employees, active unions, active members of the union alone will not address this. Retirees and more need to be to the table. And to oppose bankruptcy and then at the same time want to participate in mediation, you can't have it both ways. And bankruptcy is the only forum that will bring all of the city's creditors to the table so that a comprehensive plan of adjustment can be developed. So if it's not to happen in that forum, may I ask, what is your plan on how to get all these parties to the table to get this negotiation done by year end when you're opposing the very process that provides for that?
I opposed the process you used, sir, you and Mr. Kapoor used when you met with the retirees and the current workers. You simply told them, we're nowhere near this. This is not where we are right now. We just want to give you a heads up that what the possibilities might be for bankruptcy. And then you did it by way of television, and the men and women in that room heard every word. And then less than 24 hours, we found out that we're filing for bankruptcy. That's not how you make a presentation to employees. One of those employees, or former employee, her husband was deceased, and she said, "How am I going to make it if you cut my pension?"
And Kirkland, I'm going to have to cut you off at this point. You're continuing to share to just say things that are inaccurate. Mr. Kapoor, please continue with your presentation.
What I'm sharing with you is correct, and you know it's correct, and the employees who showed up at that meeting know it was correct.
Mayor Kirkland, I think you're attempting to interrupt the presentation because what you're sharing is not accurate.
Presentation, but I do know the rules of this MFRAC team, and what I'm seeing is the MFRAC team is supposed to consist of 4 individuals, and Mr. Kapoor is the one that always is. It's almost like Mr. Kapoor is the receiver. He is the one that's always doing the presentations, the talking, and takes up more time than anyone on this committee.
We are making a presentation to the committee, and thank you for your comments. You've been noted for the record. We will continue now with the presentation. Mr. Kapoor, please continue.
And just, Mr. Receiver, I mean, I will say with respect to the credible plan, we have not seen any type of multi-year projections. We have not seen any of those things. And whatever was provided to us at the beginning, at that time, our financial group hadn't even put together the multi-year projection. So, in some ways, you would need to have that 5-year projection before you could provide a credible alternative to be able to show us, what the future is going forward, and the plan is going forward. So respectfully, again, we do not have that. We would be happy to consider it. If there is one, we absolutely will be happy to consider it. But if we go back to the bankruptcy matter and figure out kind of, where we are, right? On March 14th, Judge Chan ruled that Chester was eligible for Chapter 9 bankruptcy. And she concluded, and these are her words, this is a federal bankruptcy judge, the city has been and remains insolvent despite the receiver's extensive pre-petition efforts to cut expenses and find sources of funding. Given that city's residents are burdened by high taxes, while essential services are diminishing, the city's residents will be prejudiced should this court deny Chapter 9 relief. Indeed, the city's goal in this Chapter 9 case is to confirm a plan that provides a permanent solution for the city of Chester and its residents. Accordingly, the court finds the city filed this bankruptcy petition in good faith. On March 28th, 2 weeks after Judge Chan's opinion, finding Chester to be eligible for Chapter 9 bankruptcy, the majority of elected officials filed a notice saying that they would be appealing Judge Chan's decision. There were only two groups that objected to eligibility. One was the elected officials. The other was one of the bondholders. To our knowledge, the bondholders who also initially objected to eligibility have not filed an appeal. So the only entity right now that has filed an appeal to the eligibility decision, which allows us to move forward with the Chapter 9 proceedings, is certain elected officials. And litigating this appeal from our end, from the receiver's end, from the city's end, from otherwise, is going to cost us time and money that we do not have, that the city does not have. And it makes very little sense given the city's undisputed financial problems. You saw the slide earlier, back in 2019, the annual general fund deficits. We had a negative general fund balance of $27.7 million in 2019. We've got $40 million in missed MMO payments and interest. As of 12/31/21, you have massive liabilities here in the city. The only way you're going to be able to address this is through some type of, is through a bankruptcy process where we get all the parties at the table. And in order for that, again, to continue and to be done, is first with the bankruptcy court finding the city being eligible for Chapter 9. So the receiver will continue with the mediation process. We're going to continue with that. But again, part of our problem is the same attorneys who are helping us with the mediation are also going to have to spend time litigating this appeal. And again, that's time, that those are legal fees spent that frankly, from our perspective, again, city elected officials have a right to do it if they so desire. But given the financial situation of the city, to us, makes little sense financially. Now, the plan modification. On January 31st of this year, Commonwealth Court Judge Ellen Seisler issued an initial ruling approving parts of the receiver's plan modification, including a provision that the receiver could suspend the administrative duties of elected officials to serve as day-to-day department heads and to appoint experienced professionals in their place. And Judge Seisler was very strong in her order. She wrote, and this is a quote from the order, "The court concludes that receiver has the authority to remove city council members from their assigned positions as department heads and to appoint experienced professionals in their place. Based on the credible evidence presented at the hearing, the court believes that such administrative changes are not only permissible, but necessary." And Judge Seisler later on in the opinion speaks at length about part of the rationale for why she did what she did, in our opinion, was necessary in order to move things forward here for the city operationally. Credible evidence presented at the hearing demonstrates the city's elected officials are not empowering receiver in the eyes of city employees. Rather, the evidence shows that city officials frequently ignore receivers' advice and directives, and even direct other employees in their departments to ignore his directives. City officials also have historically overlooked issues such as the unauthorized payroll payments to an incarcerated employee, the former police chief allowing his friends to boost their pensions by working extra overtime before retirement, and the city 7-year default on its MMO payments. These incidents, together with the evidence of widespread nepotism within the city's government, demonstrate a pattern of city officials taking care of their own and intentionally turning their backs on wrongdoing within their departments. Further exacerbating these problems is the mayor's assignment of council members as department heads based on their loyalty to city council and mayor's own inclination in a particular year, rather than on the person's actual qualifications to oversee a particular area. These practices cannot continue. That was from Judge Seisler's opinion at page 39. Judge Chan also cited this in her opinion on the eligibility decision. And again, it provides the reasoning for the receiver of why we went to court to try and address this situation. On February 7th, a majority of the elected officials appealed parts of Judge Seisler's ruling, including the part that suspended the administrative duties of elected officials. On March 29th, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court issued an order that said it would be taking the case. The effect of that order is that it stayed the appeal, so it's a legal term for meaning paused. The appealed parts of Judge Seisler's decision, including the parts that suspended the administrative duties of elected officials to serve as day-to-day department heads. And so as a result, until the court issues a decision, elected officials are now again serving in the role of department heads. So in terms of the timeline of the Supreme Court matter, the Supreme Court has really expedited, really sped up this matter. The schedule that they have set forth, that the court has set forth, is that the city elected officials brief is due on April 13th. So that is on Thursday. The receiver's reply brief is due on April 27th. Then the city elected officials reply brief to the receiver is due on May 4th. And currently oral argument is scheduled in Harrisburg on May 24th. There is no deadline, no court required deadline as to when the court would issue an opinion. That is completely up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. But obviously the court is moving quickly, which I think is appreciated, I think, by everybody here. And I think the court understands the significance of this matter. We just wanted from the receiver's end to point out really to the public how important this Supreme Court case is for the future of Chester. That plan modification, the appeal before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, is critical to Chester's future, and its importance from our perspective really can't be understated. Both the receiver and clearly the Commonwealth Court, from Judge Seisler's opinion, believe that the city needs experienced professionals, not elected officials, running the city's day-to-day operations, particularly in light of the city's financial condition and the clear evidence that was provided and presented during the confirmation hearing. Our concern really comes down to this as it relates to operations. Even if we are able to solve the city's financial problems through the bankruptcy process, if its operations are not also addressed through receivership, the city's residents are not going to receive the level of services they deserve. If you just fix the financial problem and don't fix the operational problem, again, the residents are not going to get the services that they deserve. You need to be able to do both. And from the receiver's perspective, that means putting experienced professionals running day-to-day operations in the city. So here's where we are now. Let's talk about where we are now, and then I have one final section here, and I'll be happy to answer any further questions or hear any further comments here. But where we are now is this. We have certain elected officials have appealed both the bankruptcy eligibility opinion and the plan modification. The decisions in both of those cases, both of those matters, are going to take months to resolve, even if they're done, even expedited, which is happening. And that is time that the city does not have. Without the lockbox agreement we talked about earlier, the city would have run out of money in September. That's how critical the city's financial situation is. Even with it, the projected year-end general fund balance is critically low. In 2025, the city will not be able to use ARPA funds, and we will incur an insurmountable budget deficit absent a comprehensive solution. That comprehensive solution will likely take about a year to implement, meaning that we need to develop the solution by the end of this year. We have done our best on the receiver's team to be transparent about the city's financial condition. We've been very blunt about it, and we've tried to use the tools that the receiver has been provided under Act 47. But we have to be really clear if we are not able to find a comprehensive solution, if all of us, and I say we with everybody, to find a comprehensive solution, there may be no alternative for Chester but disincorporation. And we are trying to avoid that situation. And whether it's disincorporation through the process that is put forth in Act 47, or whether you just reach a financial situation where the cliff is so big that you are not able to address it, the effect is the same. And the concern we have, again, is that we need to be focused on this. We need everybody to be focused on this. And we need to be able to come together and develop a real comprehensive solution that addresses the problems for the residents of Chester, for the retirees of Chester, and for the greater community here in Delaware County. So let's talk a little bit about what disincorporation is. I'm going to provide this to you at a very, very high level. Again, I want to be clear. I think I've said it about 6 times. I will say it again. This is something we want to avoid. This is not a path we want to go down. But again, it's something that at this point, given the city's financial condition and what we see in the future and what's going on right now, we have to talk about it. We have to raise it. Section 706A12 of Act 47 gives the receiver the power to recommend that the municipality be disincorporated. And disincorporation means that Chester is, quote, non-viable and effectively would no longer exist as a city. Practically speaking, this would mean that all city employees would be laid off, elected officials would be removed, and an administrator would be appointed by DCED to contract for the provision of vital and necessary services on behalf of the area. I will also be clear, I am not aware of any municipality that has used the Act 47 process to disincorporate, certainly not one the size of the city of Chester. So, again, a lot of this has never happened before. And again, we hope never does. But if you look at the criteria for what a non-viable municipality is, and this is under Act 47, Chapter 4, the criteria for determining whether a municipality is non-viable is that, number one, municipality is unable to function as a general purpose unit of government to provide essential services to its residents and property owners. Number two, that the municipality has experienced such deteriorated economic conditions and a collapse of its tax base that all reasonable efforts to restore economic viability have failed. And number three, that efforts to merge or consolidate the municipality with a neighboring municipality are unachievable or will not result in viability. Those are the criteria here in Act 47 for determining whether or not Chester would be non-viable. And the fact is, again, if we look at 2025, because I use that in my mind, again, as I'm working backwards, that to me, I see the significant fiscal cliff there. And in 2024, again, we also project an operating deficit. So, I don't want to give people false hope here too, to say, look, we have until 2025. But the issue that you have with viability is if you run out of money, again, whether or not you use the chapter 4 process in Act 47, if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. If you run out of cash, you run out of cash. So there's a whole process of disincorporation that is in Act 47 that will take time. And again, we're not suggesting we want to go down that route, but I also want to be really clear to folks as well. If we're out of money, we're out of money, right? And so it doesn't matter what the process is in Act 47. If you're out of money, you can't keep the lights on, and you become effectively disincorporated because you can't provide services. So the effects of disincorporation on the date of, this is from Act 47, Section 439A of Act 47. The effects are on the date of disincorporation. These four following things will happen. One is the terms of all elected officials of the municipality will end, and no person will be elected or appointed to fill any vacancy of office. All ordinances of the municipality would be nullified. So all the ordinances, all the laws get wiped out. All corporate powers granted to the municipality under its charter, municipal code, or any other provision of law will terminate. So the charter goes away. All the other powers that are granted to the city go away, and then the municipality will be deemed by operation of law to be disincorporated. And so that area formerly contained within the municipality will be what's called an unincorporated service district. So you would still get services, but those services would be contracted by an administrator who would set that up. And again, we are trying to avoid this, and so we want to be clear about this. So let me conclude with this slide, and with this sobering slide, and again, with the concern we have about the city's condition. We are desperately trying to avoid disincorporation. It is the worst possible outcome for everybody involved. But just as we warned months ago about the possibility of bankruptcy, we need to do the same with disincorporation. It is a possibility. It's not something we want, but it is a possibility. Chester's financial situation is critical, and the city is running out of time to find a solution. And from our perspective, the appeals that are going on, again, though city elected officials have the rights to make those appeal, without any meaningful alternative plan, they are consuming valuable time and resources that we need and the other parties need to focus on solutions. And so we need to bring this to the MFRAC committee. We need to bring this to the public. We need to be level with everybody about what we're seeing here in the city, about the real situation that the city is in, and about the need to really get focused on coming together and finding a real comprehensive solution that addresses the pension situation, the retiree situation, the situation with other creditors, and to ensure that the city's recurring revenues are enough to cover its recurring costs. With that, Mr. Receiver and members of the committee, I'm finished with this presentation.
Mr. Kapoor, as always, thank you for a thorough and comprehensive update. Committee's already heard a bit from me, so I will open it up to the committee for any questions.
Just a few. Is this the first? Well, this is the first time this committee is hearing about this presentation or hearing about this incorporation. But there was something on Facebook prior to this meeting. Someone placed on Facebook what would happen to Chester City after bankruptcy, and they encourage folks to view this MFRAC meeting. I'm concerned because my understanding was there was going to be something about, well, it's right here, 3 years after fiscal emergency declaration. It's almost as though that person or persons may have known about this disincorporation theory prior or before the MFRAC members. Was there some conversation with any other individuals or groups about disincorporation?
No, this is the first time this incorporation is being presented, and to the Facebook post, it was encouraging folks to tune into today's meeting to learn more about where the current state of the process of receivership, what we're dealing with, and where we see things going. And it's not what happens after bankruptcy. It's disincorporation is what happens if the bankruptcy process does not work. We're putting all of our effort into developing a plan of adjustment that will be approved by a federal judge and set Chester on the right track, a fiscal track to sustainability for years to come. So this is not a setup of, or it shouldn't be teed up as disincorporation is what happens next. This is the very real warning, or dare I say even threat of, if we don't get our act together and get this taken care of, this plan developed by the end of this year, disincorporation is a very real possibility. And
one last question. I think you said, or Mr. Kapoor said, how costly the appeals were and slowing down this process as well, and it was costly. We have currently an investigation going on about a rumor. And I didn't hear anything about the cost of, because there are lawyers being involved in this rumor investigation. I don't know how much money we spend on rumor investigations, but
Well, the harassment and defamation case or investigation that you're referring to, the lawyers involved in that investigation are being provided for by the state. So the expense of that investigation is not costing the city of Chester.
that's costing taxpayers, right?
State taxpayers, yes, as they're funding all of this, but the cost of that investigation is de minimis compared to the cost of the appeals that need to be, will be heard before the state Supreme Court and the Third Circuit Federal Court.
I'm just saying that if we're going to start investigating rumors, then we're going to be spending a whole lot of money, a whole lot of time. Thank you.
Well, let's not slander critical our employees. Is there any other questions from the committee?
We should never slander our employees. But that has happened, but I agree.
Any other questions from the committee? Well, I wanted to address a couple points. Mr. Kapoor, again, always a great presentation. I just want to draw attention to one slide, slide 16, and just hoping just to clarify one point. There are two sections of the ARPA dollars that are supporting the general fund. The first being the return to work category. Sorry, Mr. Kapoor, yes, that's it there. That's it there. The return to work category, which is addressed by the layoffs of 12 people for that one category. But I also wanted to mention the larger category are the revenue replacement dollars. I don't recall the specific amount in 2024, but it's at least 7 or 8 million per year. And that amount equates to many more positions. The return to work category is a much smaller category and would account for 12 positions. So I didn't want anyone to get the wrong impression that if we lose 2 grants, we lose 20 employees. It would be much more significant than just 20 employees. So I just wanted to point that out. The second point I wanted to make is just the very real warning or sobering message that is being delivered here. We need to have a plan of adjustment in place by the end of this year. Considering how long it will take to implement the plan, we don't have a choice. So if we're tied up in court litigation over who's on first, when it really boils down to that, through the end of the summer, I mean, we're putting ourselves back up against the wall more than we already are, and giving ourselves a very short window to reach a consensus among numerous creditors, numerous parties that will need to come together to make this plan of adjustment work. The next point I wanted to make there is, well, to jump to a couple of the public comments that have been received. Thank you, Mr. Deal, for sharing them in the chat with the full group. The first being the target completion date for the 2022 audit. If the city is able to complete 2 audits per year, we would expect to complete the 22 audit at some point in 2024, probably late 24. The city did recently complete a transition to a new accounting system, but those records don't start until the year of 2021. So we're still completing one more audit in the old system. It's a labor-intensive manual process for that old system and completing the reconciliations. So I would imagine it's going to take the rest of 2023 just to complete the 2020 audit. So that would, if we're able to speed up as we convert or switch over to the auditing the new system. The best case scenario is to complete the 2022 audit by late 2024. Continuing on that same path, if we're able to complete 2 the following year, it would be 2026 before the city is current on its fiscal year audits. Another point mentioned in the presentation, not in the chat, but in the presentation, was about animal control. The city, Chief Leitner, and along with members from my team, are working hard to try to secure a vendor or to come up with a solution. Unfortunately, it's been a tough sled, a tough go. Local, the well-known establishments in the area have not agreed to work with the city of Chester for a variety of reasons. It's turning out to be more than just a monetary issue, but we'll continue to work hard at that, and even if it means trying to bring the service in-house. But right now, although there is a considerable effort to figure out a solution for animal control, just not they have not been able to secure a contract or secure a vendor at this point. Another point I wanted to address, initially raised by Mayor Kirkland and also in the public comment, a lot of attention is being given to the last retiree meeting that was held before the filing for bankruptcy. And that is accurate that we met with retirees on November 9th of 2022, and a bankruptcy filing was submitted on November 10th. What's being left out in those comments are the number of meetings that were held prior to November 9th. The initial meeting with retirees as a group was in February of 22. And between February of 22 through November, we continued to meet with numerous parties, unions, the MFRAC committee, employees, to try to good faith negotiations, met with creditors, trying to work out any solution we could to avoid a filing. But it became abundantly clear that those efforts were not going to bring about the comprehensive plan that's needed to really set the city of Chester on the right track. So unfortunately, the filing became inevitable. Wish we didn't have to do it, but at this point, I have to say that I see it as the only forum that will bring all of the creditors and all parties to the table to figure out a solution. And the last point I'll just, well, the only other closing remark I had is just to remind folks of when our next INFRAC meeting will be on April 25th. But before we conclude, are there any comments from any of the committee members? All right, well, thank you again for your time, Mr. Kapoor. Thank you for today's presentation, and to the committee for continuing to show up and be supportive and provide the guidance that we need. Thank you for your time. Look forward to meeting again on April 25th at 1 p.m. Have a good day.